Hi viewers, welcome to SEKHAR'S Bio Factory for NEET. Principles of Inheritance and Variations with the Pedigree Chart Identification Tips with the easy and simple method. If you like this video, subscribe my channel and click on bell icon to get notification. Like, follow and share my videos to your students and friends to get more information in biology related to NEET and other national state level competitive exams. In this video, I am going to explain the pedigree analysis chart identification tips with the easy and simple method. So a pedigree is a pictorial representation of members of a family for several generations along family tree diagram and is a very most important topic for NEET. In competitive examination, we get one pedigree chart for identification. Pedigree, it helps to analyze the various traits running in a family and can also guess the probability of occurrence in the future generation. The pedigree are normally used to represent the simple dominant or recessive trait and autosome linked or X-linked traits. These diagrams are used to determine the mode of inheritance of a particular disease or a trait in the history of a family. Pedigree analysis is therefore an important tool in the both basic research and genetic counseling to determine the inheritance pattern of a trait or diseases in the history of a family. In a population, a trait or disorder, it can inherited through chromosome and this trait or disorder, it may be present on autosome or allosome and it may be in the form of a dominant condition or in the form of recessive condition for several generations. The inheritance pattern may occur in different ways. The inheritance pattern types. In this, the first type is autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, X-linked dominant, X-linked recessive, and Y-linked inheritance along with maternal inheritance. So some of the symbols are used in pedigree analysis. These are, it is the symbol square, it represents male, and circle, it represents female, and it is the shape, it indicates sex unspecified individual. If the three symbols are with a red color, that indicates these are affected individuals. Now, a line in between male and female, it indicates mating in between male and female or marriage. If double line is there, that indicates mating in between relatives, that is a consanguineous mating. And it is the symbol, it indicates the above parents and below children in order of birth left to right. Now it is the symbol, it indicates the parents with male child but male is affected, and the last symbol, it is a sex unspecified 5 individuals and these are unaffected in nature. So these are the symbols frequently used in pedigree analysis to identify the inheritance pattern of either trait or disorder in the history of a family. So there is one easy method to identify the pedigree chart. Just by looking the pedigree chart in examination, we can identify either it is autosomal dominant or autosomal recessive, either X-linked dominant or X-linked recessive. So it is very easiest tip. In this, first one question is there. By looking that pedigree chart, just by taking any one of the affected individual, So these affected children, if it have at least one affected parent, if a parent affected, yes, that is a dominant inheritance. If a parent, at least there is no one affected parent, it is recessive. So if a affected individual having affected parent, at least one parent, that indicates it is a dominant trait. If the parents are not affected, that indicates it is the recessive trait. It is an important trick to identify the pedigree chart, either it is a dominant or recessive. In similar way, if the affected male in that predictory chart, if any affected male is there, so by considering this affected male, if the affected male, if it having affected mother and affected daughter, if the affected individual having affected mother and daughter, if it is S, that indicates it is the X-linked dominant. And if the affected male do not having affected mother and affected daughter, that indicates it is autosome linked dominant. In this way, we can identify these two things. In similar way, if the affected female, so in that pedigree chart, by considering the female, affected female, if this affected female having affected father and affected son, if the female having both affected father and affected son, that indicates it is the X-linked recessive. And if the female do not having affected father and affected son, that indicates it is a autosome linked recessive. So just with this tip, immediately by looking a pedigree chart, we can identify that either it is a X-linked dominant or autosome linked dominant, X-linked recessive or autosome linked recessive. It is important trick to identify this pedigree chart. Along with that, some more information is there to confirm our result. After getting a pedigree chart, first it should be identified correctly. And these are the pedigree charts given in NCERT textbook. And first we have to identify with the easy tricks. For example, when you take affected individual, and these affected individuals have at least one affected parent, and affected individual have at least one affected parent, so it confirms that it is a dominant inheritance. And one more important trick here, when you take, so here the affected female is there, but their father is not affected and son also not affected. So now it indicates and confirms that it is autosomal dominant. And one more pedigree chart given in NCERT textbook. It is, so now here when you take this, the affected individuals, three affected individuals are there. So this affected individual not having affected parents, affected individual not having affected parents, affected individual not having affected parents, now it confirms that it is the recessive trait. And also this affected individual not having either father or mother or son or daughter affected, so now it indicates that it is autosome linked recessive disorder. So just with some tips we can immediately identify the pedigree chart. And along with that, to confirm our result, some more information is available in this. First, we have to count the number of generations in that pedigree chart, like it is, and these are denoted with Roman numbers like first generation, second generation, third generation and fourth generation. After this, each and every individual is denoted with a numerical number. For example, in the first generation is the first individual and second individual. In second generation, first, second, third, fourth, fifth and sixth individuals. In third generation, first, second, third and fourth generation, first, second, third individuals. In this way, each and every individual is denoted with a numerical number. And if you want to get or if you want to mark the genotype of individuals in pedigree chart and to get their genotype. So each individual and their genotype will be expected like this. For example, we have a four type of individuals generally in pedigree chart, and it indicates unaffected male, affected male, unaffected female, and unaffected female. So these are the individuals generally we can found in pedigree chart. And we have four type of major genetic disorders. In this, the first one is autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, X-linked dominant and X-linked recessive. For example, to identify its genotype, it's very simple method. When you take, so this unaffected male. So actually, in case of autosomal dominant, so the disorder is transfers to next generation in the form of dominant condition, and it is linked with autosomes. So if a dominant allele is there, in such condition only the individual is affected. But here the male with the homozygous recessive condition, it become unaffected, so that the expected genotype of unaffected male is small a, small a. And in autosomal dominant disorder, if a dominant allele is there, then only the male is affected, so that the genotype is expected as capital A or capital A small a. In case of unaffected female, so unaffected female in autosomal dominant, so there is no dominant allele, so that unaffected female genotype become small a, and affected female, due to having of at least one dominant allele in the form of capital A small a, the female will be affected. So in this way we can expect their genotypes. And in case of autosomal recessive, so if recessive allele is there, then only the male is affected. So but here the male is unaffected due to having of either capital A or capital A small a. And male is affected if it having recessive allele. Recessive allele is always expressed in homozygous condition in the form of small a. And unaffected female, so having dominant allele in the form of capital A or capital A small a, but affected female should have recessive allele with homozygous condition like small a. So here A, it indicates autosomes. And in some of the another Mendelian disorders like X-linked dominant and X-linked recessive. So in X-linked dominant and X-linked recessive, already we know that the male having two allosomes, XY chromosome, but female having two allosomes in the form of XX chromosomes. So in case of unaffected male, so in X-linked dominant, so if dominant allele is there, then male is affected, but here male is unaffected, so that X chromosome having recessive allele in the form of XAY, and affected male having dominant allele in the form of XA, capital A and Y. So due to having of a dominant allele on X chromosome, male is affected in X-linked dominant. And in case of unaffected female, so unaffected female, there is no dominant allele and the genotype is X small a and having two X chromosomes. And in case of X-linked dominant in affected female, consists of X capital A or X capital A, X small a. So because of at least one dominant allele in X-linked dominant, male and female are affected. Like this, male and female are affected at least if it having one dominant allele. And in case of X-linked recessive, and here male having dominant allele, so that in X-linked recessive the male become unaffected. So male are affected when the X chromosome having recessive allele in the form of X small a small y, okay, X small a capital Y, and the female are unaffected in X-linked recessive if it having X capital A or X capital A X small a, and female is affected in X-linked recessive if both X chromosome having recessive alleles like X small a X small a. So these are the expected genotypes in unaffected male and affected male, unaffected female and affected female. So if you want to get their genotype in this table, it become very easy to you to get their genotypes. And different type of genetic disorders can easily identified with some characters. In this, the first type is characteristic of autosome dominant. So in this autosomal dominant disorders, so each affected individual have at least one affected parent, and both male and female are equally likely to be affected, and there is no skipping of generations. In case of if affected individual is homozygous in nature, all offsprings will be affected. If the affected individual is heterozygous, just 50% of their offspring will be affected. So with these characters, we can identify the pedigree chart in the form of autosomal dominant. For example, it is a pedigree chart given in NCERT textbook, and already we discussed this one. And here with this, how we can identify this. And the first point, the affected individual having at least one affected parent, and there is no skipping of generation, so each and every generation is affected. Along with that, here if both male and females are equally affected, so that it is confirms autosome linked and dominant. And one more important thing, so if the affected parent is a homozygous, all offsprings will be affected, but here only 50% of offsprings are affected and remaining 50% are unaffected, so that the parent having heterozygous condition. So heterozygous condition will be seen in parent, and this flow chart and pedigree chart is identified as autosome linked dominant. Example, it is a myotonic dystrophy is an autosome linked dominant disorder. So one of the important tip to identify autosome linked dominant disorder, it is autosome linked dominant disorder affected individual have always have affected parents. So that is the important clue here. And coming to one more example, so here also, so now it confirms that there is no skipping of generation, it is a dominant, and both male and female are equally affected, and now it confirms autosome linked and affected individual having at least one parent affected. So here this parent present in heterozygous condition, so that 50% of individuals are affected, and this parent present in homozygous condition, so that all individuals are affected, and this parent present in heterozygous condition, 50% of offsprings are affected. So in this way we can identify autosome linked dominant disorders. And one more type, that is the characteristics of autosome linked recessive disorder. In this, if both parents are affected, all offsprings will be affected. If affected individuals mates with unaffected homozygous, in such condition, homozygous condition individual, all offsprings will be unaffected but acts as a carrier. And there is a skipping of generation, and male and female are equally affected. So these are the characters helps to get the autosome linked recessive disorder, and affected offsprings may have unaffected parents. So these are the important clues. And by taking one example here, so here it is one of the flowchart given in NCERT textbook. In this, the first already we discussed, the affected individual having unaffected parents, and there is a skipping of generation, and both male and female are equally affected. Now, so if unaffected parents may have affected offsprings and affected or offsprings have unaffected parents. So with these characters we can confirm that it is autosome linked recessive disorder, example sickle cell anemia. So the main important tip to identify this pedigree chart, autosomal recessive. So in this, affected individual have unaffected parents with the skipping of generations. With this tip, we can identify that it is autosome linked recessive disorder. And coming to the third type, it is the characteristics of autosome. Sorry, second type. One more flowchart, and here it is also autosome linked recessive disorder. And here, so affected parents having unaffected offsprings, and there is skipping of generation. Both male and female are equally affected. Now, this flowchart also can identified as autosomal recessive disorder. And coming to third type, the characteristics of X-linked dominant. So in this, the trait it never passes from affected father to son. So there is no transfer of the trait or disorder from father to son. All daughters of affected father will be affected. If all daughters are affected, father should be affected. So these are the important tips to identify X-linked dominant. So it is the pedigree chart, and here when you take this one, so there is no skipping of generation. Each and every generation is affected, and here in this position, the daughters, all daughters are affected, so that father also affected, and this father, affected father, it never transferred the disease to his son. So it confirms that it is X-linked dominant, and in this there is no skipping of generation, and affected individual have at least one affected father, so that it confirms X-linked dominant. And the important key point is, in X-linked dominant disorders, affected father have all affected daughters, and there is no skipping of generation. With this character we can confirm that it is a X-linked dominant disorder. And a characteristics of X-linked recessive disorder. In this, so males are more likely affected than female hemizygous, and if a mother is affected, all children will be affected, and affected individual have unaffected parents, and a criss-cross inheritance will be seen in these individuals. And for example, when you take this one, here males are more likely affected, so majority of males are affected, and affected individual have at least one parent affected, and it confirms that it is a and it unaffected parents. And here the affected individual having unaffected parents, it confirms that it is a recessive disorder. And same time, so the mother is affected, all her sons are affected. So mother is affected, all sons are affected. So it confirms that X-linked recessive disorder. And the main key point is, in X-linked recessive disorder, mother have affected mother have all sons with affected and crisscross inheritance. Along with that, some of the another important pedigree charts related to X-linked disorder, sorry, Y-linked disorders. In this, so in Y-linked disorder, only males are affected and females are unaffected. So that confirms that it is Y-linked, and there is no skipping of generations. And if a father is affected, 100% all sons are affected. So it is the flowchart. In this pedigree chart, we can observe that all males are affected. There is no affected female. And if a father is affected and all his sons are affected, all his sons are affected, so it indicates that it is a Y-linked disorder. And the main key point here, The Y-linked inheritance, only males are affected. And the last one is the characteristics of a maternal inheritance, that is also called as mitochondrial inheritance. It's very simple to identify this maternal inheritance. In this, the affected mother will have all affected offsprings. If a mother is affected, all her children are affected. Both, but if a father is affected, none of their offsprings will be affected. So these are the two important key features for maternal inheritance. And in this pedigree chart, and here, so mother is affected, so that all her children are affected. Mother is affected, all her children are affected. But a father is affected, there is no affected children. So it indicates that it is maternal inheritance. And the key point is, so mother is affected, all children are affected. So that indicates maternal inheritance. So hope you understand this concept. With the easy trick, you can easily identify the pedigree chart, either it is a dominant or recessive or X-linked or autosome link. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, subscribe my channel and click on bell icon to get notifications.